If you've caught whispers about a new rebate check worth more than $2,000, you're not imagining it, and you're not the only one trying to figure out what's real. Right now, there's an actual piece of legislation sitting in Congress that could put anywhere from $1,020 to $2,040 directly into the pockets of everyday Americans. This isn't a rumor making the rounds on social media. It isn't some recycled stimulus story dusted off from a few years back. It's a real bill with a real bill number introduced by a sitting member of Congress. Today, we're going to walk through exactly what it is, why it exists, who stands to qualify, and everything that still has to happen before a single check gets mailed out. Stick with me, because by the end of this video, you'll understand this proposal better than most news anchors currently covering it. The basics. Let's start at the beginning. The bill is called the American Consumer Tariff Rebate Act of 2026, and it was introduced in the House of Representatives by Congressman Henry Cuellar of Texas. It was formally referred to the House Ways and Means Committee, the powerful committee that handles anything touching taxes and federal revenue. The whole idea behind the bill rests on one straightforward argument. Tariffs act like a hidden tax on ordinary families. When prices climb at the checkout line because of tariffs, it's everyday consumers absorbing that cost, not foreign governments, and not the corporations doing the importing. Cuellar and the lawmakers backing this legislation believe that if the government effectively collected extra money from Americans through tariff-inflated prices, then at least some of that money owes to be sent back to the people who actually paid it, where the bill came from. And here's where the story gets genuinely interesting, because this bill didn't materialize out of nowhere. It followed directly on the heels of a major legal development. Back in February 2026, the United States Supreme Court ruled that the International Emergency Economic Powers Act does not actually grant a president the authority to impose tariffs the way they'd been imposed. In plain terms, the court found that certain tariffs had been put in place without proper congressional sign-off. That ruling kicked open a much bigger conversation in Washington about what should happen to all the money those tariffs had already generated, and whether the American consumers who paid higher prices because of them deserve some kind of refund. The American Consumer Tariff Rebate Act is, in many ways, a direct response to that ruling. The money behind the bill. So how much money are we actually talking about? According to figures released alongside the bill, the total pool of money this legislation is built around comes to roughly $231.35 billion. That number isn't pulled out of thin air. It's based on estimates from the Congressional Budget Office and the Joint Economic Committee, who calculated that consumers nationwide absorbed approximately that much in extra costs because of tariffs later found to lack proper congressional authorization. The bill's core logic is simple. If Americans collectively paid that much extra because of these tariffs, that same pool of money should flow back to them as direct payments. The headline numbers. Now, let's get to the numbers everyone actually came here for. Using current IRS filing data from Congressman Cuellar's home region in South Texas as a sample, his office estimated that the average single filer could receive about $1,020. Heads of household, meaning single parents or other unmarried individuals supporting a household, could see an average payment around $1,530, and married couples filing jointly could receive an average rebate of roughly $2,040. On top of those base amounts, the bill also taxes on an additional $125 per qualifying child in the household, meaning families with multiple kids could end up with a noticeably larger total payment. I want to pause here because this is a detail a lot of headlines gloss right over. These figures are estimates drawn from one congressional district using local IRS data as a representative sample. They are not fixed dollar amounts written directly into the bill's legal text. Think of them as a realistic snapshot of what an average household might expect to receive if the bill becomes law in its current form, not a guarantee. The actual amount any individual household ends up with would depend on factors like income, filing status, number of dependents, and exactly how the final version of the legislation defines eligibility. who qualifies. Speaking of eligibility, there's already one income limit built directly into the proposal. As written, households reporting adjusted gross income above $400,000 would not qualify for the rebate at all. The reasoning behind that cutoff is to steer the available funds toward middle and working class families, the people most likely to actually feel higher prices on everyday goods, rather than spreading the money evenly across every income bracket regardless of need. Lawmakers behind the bill have framed this as a fairness measure, redirecting money that would have gone to very high earners into bigger payments for families with children instead. The broader political picture. It's worth understanding this bill in its broader context because it isn't happening in isolation. Around the same time, Congressman Cuellar introduced his proposal, a separate group of lawmakers in the Senate introduced their own version of tariff relief. Senator Martin Heinrich of New Mexico put forward a bill called the Tariff Refunds for Working Families Act, which takes a somewhat different approach. Under that Senate proposal, joint filers earning less than $180,000 a year could receive a payment of $1,200 plus an additional $600 per dependent child. That bill drew support from a group of Democratic senators including Cory Booker and Andy Kim of New Jersey, Ruben Gallego of Arizona, Chris Van Hollen of Maryland, Chris Coons of Delaware, Kirsten Gillibrand of New York, Tammy Duckworth of Illinois, and Jack Reed of Rhode Island. And the story doesn't stop there. Earlier in this whole saga, Republican Senator Josh Hawley of Missouri introduced his own version called the American Worker Rebate Act, proposing $600 per adult and per child for qualifying households, with income limits set at $75,000 for individuals and $150,000 for couples filing jointly. So what we're really witnessing is multiple lawmakers from different parties taking different approaches, but all circling the same fundamental idea: that tariff revenue collected from American consumers should, at least in part, find its way back to those same consumers in the form of a check or direct deposit. Even President Trump has weighed in on this idea more than once over the past year. He's floated the concept of sending Americans tariff dividend checks worth somewhere between $1,000 and $2,000, describing it almost like a dividend payment to the American people, funded by record tariff revenue. At one point, National Economic Council Director Kevin Hassett said he expected the president to support legislation for a rebate around $2,000, but he was careful to note that actually sending out checks requires action from Congress. That distinction matters enormously, because no matter how much support an idea has from the White House, the Constitution gives Congress, not the president alone, the power to authorize this kind of direct spending. Is this actually going to happen? So here's the big question. Is this actually going to happen? Here's the honest, balanced answer. As of right now, the American Consumer Tariff Rebate Act is still sitting in the House Ways and Means Committee. It hasn't passed a vote in the House. It hasn't been taken up by the Senate. It hasn't been signed into law. Congress introduces a staggering number of bills every single year, and only a small fraction ever survive committee review, clear floor votes in both chambers, and reach a presidential signature. This bill is currently in that early, fragile stage, generating real attention and public conversation, but still facing a long road before any rebate check could actually be printed or deposited. There are real obstacles in the way, too. Some economists and policy analysts have raised concerns about the underlying math, questioning whether tariff revenue is genuinely large enough to fund nationwide direct payments without adding to the federal deficit or fueling inflation. Others point out that pushing any large spending bill through a divided Congress, especially one involving this much taxpayer money, typically demands lengthy negotiation, amendments, and compromise, including disagreements over whether the money should go toward rebates at all versus paying down the national debt instead. A word of caution. This brings me to an important warning. Because this story has picked up so much attention, it's also attracted scammers. There are already reports of fake text messages and emails promising tariff rebate checks designed to trick people into handing over personal information or paying upfront fees. If you ever get a message claiming you need to pay money, click a suspicious link or hand over sensitive personal details to receive a tariff rebate, treat that as an immediate red flag. No legitimate government rebate program, now or ever, has required you to pay a fee upfront to receive money you're owed. Always rely on official government sources for updates on legislation like this, never on random messages claiming to know your eligibility status. Where things stand. So where does that leave you watching this right now? The American Consumer Tariff Rebate Act of 2026 is a genuine bill introduced by a sitting congressman responding to an actual Supreme Court ruling about tariffs found to be improperly authorized. The numbers we've discussed: $1,020 for single filers, $1,530 for heads of household, $2,040 for married couples filing jointly, are realistic estimates grounded in actual IRS data, not invented figures designed to generate clicks. At the same time, this remains a proposal in the earliest stages of the legislative process, sitting alongside several competing bills that share a similar goal but differ in the details. If this matters to you, and given how much everyday costs are weighing on households right now, it probably does. The best move is to stay informed through reliable sources. Keep an eye on how this bill moves through the Ways and Means Committee, and stay alert to communication from your actual elected representatives or trusted news outlets, rather than unsolicited messages promising quick cash. Congress moves slowly, but public pressure and attention can sometimes speed things along, especially in an election year when affordability has become one of the most talked about issues in the country. We'll keep tracking this story closely, and the moment there's real movement, a committee vote, a floor vote, or any change to the proposed amounts, we'll bring you a full update right here. If you found this breakdown useful, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss the next development. Because when it comes to your money and the decisions being made in Washington, staying informed is the single best thing you can do for yourself.